Well, good morning. How's it going? This is the reluctant retiree here, and come sit down and have a coffee with me, and let me tell you a story of how I managed to get into the situation that I'm in right now, and why I sold my house, left my business, and set out on this adventure, and why it all led down to this situation. It's quite an interesting story, and I think you'll find that maybe there is a lot of commonalities going on today in other people's lives. But yes, after having a barber shop in a small village for 30 years, I was absolutely sideswiped by the whole COVID event, and it set me back so far. It was unbelievable. The money that was given out by the government nowhere near compensated for the actual loss of income, and yes, it just got to a point where it was all out of hand. And of course I was getting to that age, I was getting up to I think 60, 68, 69. I wanted to slow down anyways, and I felt kind of, as the town's only, or the village's only barber, I felt kind of locked in that position. And so that is one thing, that is one's upside about that situation, is it gave me the nudge that I actually needed to move my butt. And of course, one of the things that I've learned through 30 odd years, 35 years of cutting hair, because I still do the occasional haircut, and just talking to customers, one of the commonest things that I heard in a chair was regret. Okay, and so I guess I should have learned that sooner. But you do not want to go to your grave with regrets that you didn't do something because you didn't get up and go do it. So I may not have without that nudge. I don't know. We'll never know, because we could never go back and undo all of that. But I had an opportunity to sell my house. I had some friends who lived up around the Halliburton area, and they wanted me to manage their off-grid 50-acre retreat, and that's what I did. Yeah, I walked away from my business. Couldn't sell it, couldn't get any takers, so a big loss there. And at the peak of the market, I sold my house, cleared all of my debt, and I moved up to this wonderful 50-acre retreat. And I had a wonderful 2 years there. I just got Jasmine. It was a wonderful environment for her to run around in. She had her pups there, and yes, it was an amazing 2 years with my friends there. And I was making trails, putting gardens in. There was people would come up in the summertime, to do retreats and so on and so forth. And in the wintertime, it was just maintaining the systems on the property. Unfortunately, the wife of the owners passed away, and there was 2 properties involved. It became, where I was, became a bit of an anchor, and so that ended up being sold, and I had to move on. Yes, the next 2 places I stayed at were attempts at homesteading on other people's property. The one there, I built a tiny home out of containers, and but it just turned out to be a poor fit. And of course, this is a word of warning to people who are answering ads or getting involved in homesteading with other people's property. It's not as easy as it might seem from the outside, and yes, when you get into the nitty-gritty, and of course the takeaway from that is you need to have everything written down on paper. Okay, everything needs to be written down and understood before you do anything. And then the next property, she was a sweetheart, but the property was overwhelming, and like many homesteaders, she'd taken on really more than she could cope with, and that was the idea of me going to live there. And then unexpectedly her parents took ill, and she had to sell the property, and I had to move on again. But in between, whilst that was all going on, I realized that if I was going to live this kind of life, I needed a home on wheels that I could move around, preferably with an engine. And so whilst I was first little part of being on Josie's there, I bought this motorhome here, and spent the year basically preparing it to be a comfortable home to live in. The plan was, well, I wasn't sure. I was going to stay the first winter. I was going to stay in Canada, but I couldn't find a situation. I couldn't find rent that was cheap enough that I could afford, and I think this is where we're going to start seeing similarities, is that there are lots of people my age. I simply couldn't afford to keep my home. The way property taxes were going up, the maintenance, the utilities, everything you can think of, it was just getting. I could see the writing on the wall. I could see the writing on the wall. And like I say, when I had the opportunity to clear all of my debt, and I used some of that money, of course, to buy my motorhome. I gave my kids their inheritance, meagre as it were. I said, that's it, guys. I thought they could use it whilst they were younger rather than older. And I said, that's it. Like, I have nothing else left. That's it. Everything is gone. I sold off everything. As I moved from one property to another, I trimmed down all of the things that I owned. And to be quite honest with you, I am really enjoying the idea of no debt, and to be able to move around where I want to. So anyway, this winter, because I couldn't find anywhere, prompted me to go down to the US and down to Texas after a trip out to BC, which I thoroughly enjoyed, apart from the fact that the ostrich farm, the ostriches did get killed by the CFIA in the end. But I stayed there for 3 weeks and met some really wonderful people, had a fantastic trip down to the US. It was a real adventure, and stayed in Texas for 5 months. And so, yes, that's going to be my routine, is backwards and forwards from Ontario here down to Texas. I am going to be a volunteer at a state park, and so that gives me free accommodation for 5 months in return for 26 hours of volunteer work a week. And so that fits right in with my whole ideals of life and homesteading and community and that kind of thing. The fact that no money is changing hands, it is simply a trade-off of my labour and experience and skills in a state park in return for a free RV hookup for the entire season. So they get something, I get something. I think that is a real good deal. But the big thing for me is being able to get away every winter and to be able to afford to do that. And so, yes, I'm trying to build up my YouTube channel, and I've got 2 channels. This one, the Hound Dog, which is a little bit more political. I'll leave a link down for that in the description box if any of you want to go over there and see some of that. This early spring, whilst I was down in Texas, I finished writing my book, the secrets of the Jewish secrets of business, and that's at the editor right now, and I'm hoping to get that published sometime this summer. So yes, this was, what can I say, was I pushed or did I jump? It's a bit of both. I've always wanted to travel. That was my intention when I came to Canada. I travelled through Europe. I was on board ship for my first apprenticeship as marine mechanic, and sailed all over the world that way. I travelled through Europe, got to Istanbul in Turkey, came back, lived in Amsterdam for 2 years. So I did a great deal of travelling in Europe, and that's I came over to see my father in Canada, but the intent was to see the whole of North America. So yes, I'm a little long in the tooth, but this is a dream fulfilled. And but as I've come down this path, I'm looking back and going, holy jumpers. I know so many seniors now who are on the edge. People who did everything right, followed all the rules, now simply cannot keep up with the cost of living and the cost of. They own their own homes. I mean, this is the amazing thing about it, ladies and gentlemen. They own their own homes, and you are going to see people living in trailers more and more. And although municipalities don't like this kind of stuff, and they've written bylaws against it, I am pretty certain that they are going to have to rescind a lot of these bylaws, or just watch seniors sleeping on the street because they have literally nowhere else to go. All the seniors' homes are full. Yes, it's a very dire situation, and this is going on not just in Canada, but all the way through North America. But it's just, I think we're going to see more and more of this as time goes by, and it's saddening. It's saddening that, you know, we can spend money in all kinds of areas for other people so that they can have better lives, and yet we cannot take care of our own seniors who worked all of their lives, contributed everything. Even though I was a service worker, you know, I was contributing to the people who were contributing to the building of Canada, because everyone's important. You know, when you see the army, the cooks are just as important as the frontline operatives. Okay, so I'm just staggered. The pensions have not kept up. There's been no recognition, you know, that the cost of living is way beyond the reach of so many people. People are renting. You cannot rent in this area. Literally, you'd be lucky to find something for $1,500 a month. And then you got your food on top of that, a phone. Where do you get your internet from? You know, food prices are going through the roof. You basically are only getting $2,000 on pension. You know, you'd almost be better off in prison, for goodness sake. So you pay $1,500 in rent. That means you've got $100, $125 a month just for food. And we haven't talked about heating, the wintertime. You know, I mean, there is a huge saving to me going south every wintertime. And, you know, that was one of the reasons why I made that decision. But, yes, how do you reconcile all of this? I have no idea. I have really no idea. But that's how I got here. And is there a way to go back? Wow, things would have to change. Things would have to change really big time for me to be able to afford to go back to anything other than this. Yes, absolutely staggering, ladies and gentlemen, my friends. And I wonder, you know, how many people who are going to see this are close to or thinking about this as an option. And we're seeing it all over. You can see the growth of tent cities. And I mean, I made a prediction about 5 years ago, and I said that, you know, for every person you see in a tent city, there are 1,000 people hanging from the lowest branch of the tree, waiting to fall into a tent city. And so you're going to see the growth of these things. And again, municipalities don't like the look of this. And I hate to say this, but a lot of these municipalities are run by Liberal councillors. And the one in Peterborough, for example, the council in Peterborough, their way of dealing with this is bringing a municipal backhoe in and just picking up all the stuff and put it in a dumpster. You know, these people, that's all they have. They have, you know, almost less than nothing. And, you know, this is the way we include people. This is the way we take care of people. You know, where's the humanity when you can see that these people are really struggling to get by as we've moved from a complicated world into a complex world? So that's about it for today, as my thoughts. Just settling into being back in Canada, and yes, I am looking forward for some warm weather. It's the end of April, and my God, we're going into minus temperatures this weekend again. Absolutely stunning. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me today. And if you've enjoyed this video, please like, comment, subscribe below, share far and wide, and we'll talk very, very shortly. See you now. Bye.